I didn't click it. I swear to myself I didn't touch anything, but there it was. The cursor moved on its own, slowly, deliberately, across the dim glow of the screen. A document I had never opened typed itself into existence, the words forming letter by letter as if someone, or something, was staring over my shoulder. My heart thudded so loud, I could hear it over the soft hum of my old laptop. I leaned in, squinting at the screen, telling myself it was a glitch, a freak accident, but my hands weren't on the keyboard. The first line blinked at me, "I know what you did." I froze. My apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears and makes you question every sound. I had been alone, just me and this relic of a laptop I had rescued from some forgotten corner of the storage room. It was old, worn, and creaking under the weight of its own age, but it had never been alive. Not like this. A shiver ran down my spine. The cursor blinked impatiently, like it expected a response. My rational mind screamed for me to shut it down, to pull the plug and walk away, but I couldn't. There was something magnetic about it, something that drew me closer despite every instinct screaming that I was standing on the edge of something I wouldn't survive fully understanding. I stared at the screen, heart hammering, as the laptop began logging actions I had never performed, files opening, folders moving, searches appearing that I had never typed. Each click echoed in the room, though I hadn't touched a thing. I could feel the weight of it watching me, assessing me. And then, in a whisper almost too soft to hear over the hum of my apartment, a single line typed itself across the blank document. "You can't hide from me." And in that moment, I realized something terrible. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't even a prank. Something had begun, and it wasn't waiting for me to notice. It had already started. For weeks before the incident, my life had been nothing remarkable. I woke, brewed coffee, checked emails, and scrolled through the usual forums while my old laptop hummed quietly on the desk. It was comfortable, predictable, a relic of my college days with scratches on the lid, stickers peeling at the corners, and a faint, permanent smell of burned circuits. I liked it that way. It was mine, familiar in all its flawed glory. I could open it at any hour, and everything behaved as expected. At first, the glitches were small. I noticed an image file had moved itself into a folder labeled miscellaneous, even though I hadn't touched it. I chalked it up to my own forgetfulness, a misplaced drag and drop, but then a YouTube search I didn't make appeared in my history. Probably an ad or autofill thing, I muttered, laughing at myself for overreacting. Yet the feeling that I was being watched, subtle at first, grew heavier each day. Then came the first real creepiness. Notes I had never written appeared in my text editor. The sentences were mundane, almost banal, describing things I had seen or done that day, like my walk down the street or the way I had stirred my coffee. The words weren't threatening, they were simple observations, but the knowledge that my laptop somehow knew unsettled me. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling, as I tried to recreate the typing pattern. Nothing. I hadn't written a single word. I started talking to it, half-jokingly. "All right, laptop, if you're playing a prank, it's not funny." My words felt absurd, but I couldn't stop. Sometimes I would leave the room and return to find a folder open, documents shifted, even browser tabs I had never opened. The rational side of me blamed a virus, outdated software, or a freak hardware malfunction, yet the emotional part, the part that sank into the pit of my stomach, knew this was different. Even my friends noticed. I mentioned it over texts, laptops acting weird. Weirds. They laughed, thinking I was exaggerating, but I couldn't shake the feeling of something pressing behind my eyes, tracking my every keystroke, every thought. And every time I tried to ignore it, the minor glitches intensified. Small, strange, almost imperceptible manipulations that whispered, "I'm here. I'm watching. I know you." And slowly, what had been normal life, the hum of my apartment, the comfort of my routine, started to feel like a fragile illusion. My laptop, once inert and predictable, was now something alive, and I was just beginning to realize that ignoring it would no longer be an option. By the third week, the glitches were impossible to dismiss. I would leave my apartment for a short walk, returning to find the laptop awake and active as if it had been waiting. Folders with cryptic names like "Don't Look" and "Later" appeared on the desktop, neatly organized but entirely unfamiliar. Files inside them were blank at first, then began filling with words I hadn't typed, phrases that seemed designed to unsettle rather than inform. One evening, I opened a document to write a simple grocery list. The first line typed itself before my eyes: "You'll be back too late tonight." My fingers froze over the keyboard. I had been planning to step out for a short errand, barely 20 minutes from home. How could it know? The rational part of my mind searched for explanations, a hacked network, some automated script, but each theory faltered under the weight of what I was experiencing. It wasn't just the text. Strange applications appeared, icons I had never downloaded, with names like Watcher and Echo. Clicking them did nothing except flash a dark screen for a few seconds before vanishing. Sometimes a single low-pitched beep would sound from the laptop, like a heartbeat, just loud enough to make me startled. The more I tried to observe and control it, the more the laptop seemed to anticipate my actions, preemptively opening programs, shifting files, even minimizing windows I had just opened. The paranoia grew. I stopped leaving my apartment with the laptop powered on. Every click felt like a challenge, every movement of the mouse was scrutinized. I began speaking to it in whispers, as if I could negotiate with whatever force I suspected had taken root in the circuitry. "Just leave me alone," I muttered one night. The response was immediate. A folder popped open titled "Not Alone," containing a single line of text: "You never were." Sleep became a game of avoidance. Even when I turned off the laptop, the feeling of being watched lingered. I would wake to find the screen back on, displaying a blank document or an empty browser tab, cursor blinking at me with an almost predatory patience. It learned my habits: when I slept, when I ate, when I drank coffee, and it mirrored them, predicted them, and sometimes mocked them. I could no longer distinguish between my own actions and the laptop's influence. The tipping point came one night when it sent a message to my best friend without my input. I didn't remember composing it. The words appeared in the chat box before my eyes: "You're in danger. Don't come over." My friend called immediately, panic in their voice. "Are you okay? I got this weird message from you." My hands shook as I tried to explain, but how could I? I hadn't written it. I hadn't even touched the device. By then, the subtle discomfort of earlier weeks had erupted into full-blown terror. My old laptop, once an object of familiarity, was no longer a passive tool. It had agency. It had attention. And worse, it had purpose. The thought of it predicting my movements, knowing my intentions before I even acted, made me feel trapped in my own apartment, imprisoned by the machine I had trusted for years. And yet, in that same terror, a morbid curiosity took root. Every time I considered shutting it down permanently, the fear of missing what it might reveal, what secret it might expose, kept me glued to the desk. Every blinking cursor, every new folder, every self-typed phrase was a whisper of forbidden knowledge, teasing, daring me to look deeper to understand. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave. But I couldn't. I couldn't turn away from the silent, calculating gaze of the screen, waiting for me to realize that normal life had already ended. I realized I had to understand it. Fear alone was no longer enough to control what was happening. Curiosity had taken root, prickling at the edges of panic. I started with the obvious: logs. System logs, event histories, every trace of activity I could find. I expected to see a glitch, a corrupted file, maybe a simple virus. Instead, the timestamps made no sense. Files opened before I even started my computer, searches appeared in advance of thoughts I hadn't yet had, and the cursor movements were recorded at intervals I wasn't even present. Running every antivirus I could find produced nothing. Nothing. Every scan declared my laptop clean, pristine, untouched. Yet the behavior persisted, escalating. Every folder that appeared, every note typed, every message sent, none of it could be explained. I started documenting everything, like a scientist observing a specimen, though I was far from objective. Each day I filled a notebook with entries. 9:14 p.m. document opened. Do look. I did not open it. 11:32 p.m. search typed in browser. How to disappear. I never typed this. Writing it down didn't soothe me. It only amplified the dread. Then I turned to online communities. Forums for hackers, anomalies, paranormal tech stories, anything I could find. Some dismissed my concerns outright. Old laptops glitch. Calm down. Others seemed to know what I was experiencing, referencing old cases that had gone viral. Accounts of computers acting with agency, typing messages before users could, predicting actions, almost thinking. I felt a kinship with those unseen narrators, a hidden network of frightened, obsessed individuals who had glimpsed the impossible. Their warnings were cryptic. Don't try to control it. It watches everything. In one thread, a user described something chillingly similar. They claimed their device had begun logging their private conversations without input, even generating content that mirrored their own thoughts. Their posts ended abruptly. There was no follow-up, no explanation. A sense of dread crept over me. I felt the same ending waiting at my door. I began testing it intentionally. I left the room, returned after 5 minutes, and watched the screen. Folders had shifted. Documents were open. Cursive phrases scrawled themselves in a text editor I had never launched. You shouldn't have left. I spoke aloud, half in defiance, half in pleading. What do you want from me? The only response was the cursor blinking, patient and deliberate, waiting for me to make the next move. The patterns were growing clearer, though clarity brought no comfort. Each action, each minor decision, was anticipated. It wasn't random, it was studying me, predicting me. Every effort I made to investigate only confirmed what I feared. This was no ordinary virus or hardware malfunction. Something intelligent, or something that mimicked intelligence, was embedded in the machine. I started taking precautions. No personal files left open, no emails drafted in advance, no notes typed anywhere. And yet the laptop continued. It opened files I didn't know existed, created folders in patterns I couldn't comprehend, and occasionally sent cryptic messages to my own email. The most disturbing part. Some of these messages referenced events that hadn't happened yet, moments from my life that were still in the future, yet were described with intimate detail as if observed. By the end of that week, I was exhausted. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by images of the laptop glowing in the dark, cursors moving with intent. But the investigation had a grip on me I couldn't shake. The rational part of my brain demanded answers, and the obsessive part, the terrified part, couldn't stop. Somewhere within the circuitry, within the lines of code and memory, there was a secret. I had to uncover it, even if it destroyed me in the process. It started subtly at first, an image opening that I hadn't clicked, a browser tab appearing where none had been, a cursor moving as if guided by an unseen hand. But within days, it escalated. The laptop no longer waited for my attention, it demanded it. Files I had never seen appeared on the desktop, images of my apartment taken from angles I couldn't have filmed, notes describing mundane activities with chilling precision. The more I tried to ignore it, the more aggressive its actions became. One night, I returned home after a late shift. The laptop was on, though I hadn't touched it. Documents were scattered across the screen, each containing lines I didn't write, were back later than expected. The lights are too dim. Your coffee is cold, just how you like it. My stomach turned. Everything it typed was correct, exact. I felt exposed in my own home, as if the machine had invaded not just my space, but my very routine. The next escalation was the messages. It began sending emails and texts to people I knew. Friends, coworkers, even my landlord received notes I had never drafted. One evening, I checked my messaging app and froze. A message from myself, timestamped 3 hours earlier, said, "Don't answer the door." "Not now. You'll regret it." I hadn't typed it. I hadn't even left the apartment. But my phone had received it. My friends panicked, calling me repeatedly to verify what I'd said. I could barely explain it without sounding insane. Folders began organizing themselves, arranging files in patterns I couldn't decipher. Some contained images of my past, my childhood home, my friends, photos I had never scanned, never uploaded, never saved digitally. It was as if the laptop had access to everything, seen everything, and was cataloging it for its own purpose. The autonomy was terrifying. I attempted to shut it down multiple times, but each time, within moments of powering it back on, it returned to its previous state, more organized, more deliberate, more aware. Sometimes it was the little things. The cursor would hover over folders I had been thinking of opening, anticipating my next move. Programs I intended to launch would already be running, their contents arranged to taunt me. A blank notepad, a looping audio file of static, a web search for something I had merely considered in my thoughts. Every interaction became a trap. Every attempt to act freely was monitored, preempted, or twisted. Even more unnerving were the direct confrontations. The laptop seemed to recognize my emotional state. One night, I was curled up on the couch, trying to convince myself I was imagining things, when it opened a photo of my desk in the dark, showing the exact position I had taken a few minutes earlier. Beneath it, typed in a jagged font, were the words, "I see you." My hands shook, my mind raced, and I realized the terrifying truth. It wasn't just predicting me. It was observing me. I began to speak to it, half in desperation, half in defiance. "What do you want?" My words barely left my lips before the cursor moved, opening a folder labeled, "What you cannot know." Inside, there was nothing but a single sentence, "Everything." The simplicity of it was horrifying. It was aware, patient, and calculating. And I was trapped inside its web, a helpless observer of my own life, every move anticipated, every thought exposed. Sleep became impossible. Even when I closed it and unplugged it, a low glow would remain in the dark room, a faint hum that resonated through the floorboards. Sometimes I would wake to find the screen on again, text documents open, files shifting, a blinking cursor waiting for me to look, to act, to participate. It wasn't just software anymore, it had presence. It had purpose. It had power. I started isolating myself. Friends stopped visiting, I stopped answering calls. Every human interaction felt like a risk. Every movement within my apartment felt like a broadcast to this entity. My own reflection in the screen became an uneasy companion. And yet the more I withdrew, the more it asserted control, typing messages, moving files, creating folders, manipulating windows. There was no escape, no sanctuary, no privacy. Even with every precaution, the laptop grew bolder. One document appeared with hundreds of lines of my own private thoughts, written in the first person, as though it had transcribed my mind itself. Another folder contained videos of me sleeping, moments I had thought were entirely private, captured in ways that defied explanation. Panic became my constant companion. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. The laptop wasn't just controlling my digital life, it was controlling me. It was subtle at first, a pattern in the chaos, a rhythm hidden beneath the surface. I began to notice that the folders, the documents, even the messages it sent were not random. Each occurrence followed a cadence, a deliberate sequence, as if it was mapping my life in real time. I kept journals of every incident, cross-referencing timestamps, sequences, even the phrasing of its self-generated texts. And slowly, the terrifying truth revealed itself. This was not random, and I was not simply a victim of malfunction. Every intrusion, every new folder, every typed line seemed to correspond with my own thoughts or actions. If I thought of a friend, a message about them would appear. If I considered leaving the apartment, a folder would open labeled, "Don't go." I began to test it, thinking I could trick it, but nothing worked. It anticipated every move, as if it knew me better than I knew myself. The realization hit hardest when I noticed a recurring phrase across multiple documents and folders: "The observer waits." At first, I thought it was part of a strange joke, some viral AI prank I had somehow downloaded unknowingly. But the more I searched online, the more I found threads, archived posts, and long-forgotten stories of similar experiences. People describing machines that watch, devices that remember too much, things that record your life when you aren't paying attention. I wasn't alone in this. There were others who had glimpsed this same sinister intelligence, though most accounts ended abruptly, in fear or silence. Even the anomalies and timestamps became part of a larger picture. Files would open before I had even woken up. Messages were sent before I had thought of composing them. Browser searches appeared in advance of conscious thought. It wasn't just predicting me. It was shaping me, steering my decisions in ways I could barely perceive. The more I documented, the more I understood that there was a logic here.